Through our journey and through the documentary of Mallory's Army, what I really wanted to do was continue this voice and continue to showcase other people's stories. Because I think that one of the biggest obstacles that we have is that people feel sorry for you for a few months. You know, they feel sorry, but then they expect you to move on, and what they don't understand is that you never move on. So I wanted to use my life to showcase other people's stories and the things that happen to them, but also what they're doing. They're taking on challenges that I didn't know needed to be taken on, and now that I'm living it, I go, oh, now I can get it. When Mallory, I started talking briefly about when Mallory first passed away, I get hundreds of emails from people, you know, and I always say that this is kind of like the new Me Too movement, the real Me Too movement. Not that there's anything wrong with, but I always say this is kind of the real Me Too movement. And for, when I hear these stories of my child, you know, we're in the same category, I often have to read them just for my own self-understanding of what has happened to my family, because I still, you know, I tell everybody for the world out there it's been 2.5 years, but for me it's been 2.5 minutes. Like, it's really difficult to wrap your head around what has happened. So this,
you know, that for me, I feel like it has been 2.5 minutes since I read about your daughter.
Yeah.
Because that's how big it is.
Yeah.
So I get that.
Yeah.
I get that.
Even Seth and I sometimes will catch ourselves looking and going, oh my God, you know, Mallory died. Like, we just can't believe it sometimes. Like, she's not here with us. Like, sometimes the other day there were kids in our house and they were just running up and down, and for a brief second I almost thought I heard her. You know what I mean? Like, for a brief moment it was so normalized that it was. So, but I received this really interesting email from a woman, and she said after Mallory passed away, she said that it just kind of was so shocking to her that a child that looked like Mallory would hurt herself. She said, I've got some questions. So she immediately went upstairs and asked her son, have you thought of hurting yourself? And within an instant, he pulled out a spiral notebook, and he had goodbye letters in this notebook, several goodbye letters that said, you know, he was leaving. And in one of the letters, it was always about, you know, that he was the fat kid at school, he was the slow kid in gym class, like his self-body image of who he was and all of that was really in the letters of how he truly felt. And she described herself as a mom who knew that her son was the chubby kid at school and knew that he didn't fit in. And I thought that her journey in this was so important. She said after they sat on their bed and cried for hours about this particular set of letters, she said, you know, what we did next is really a testament to the Mallory's Army journey. She said that she went downstairs to her pantry and she opened it up, and every piece of junk food, you know, the cookies, the candies, the chips, the everything, they just threw them out. And she goes, you don't understand how difficult that was to throw all of those items away, because there was a relationship with those items, right? You went to the store, you bought them, you treasured them. The way she described their relationship with this junk food, it was so eye-opening for me. Yeah. And as I read more, I listened. And she said that they threw everything out, and then she started taking very deliberate steps to do things to make a better life. And the first thing she did, obviously, was sign her son up for therapy, because he definitely needed to talk to someone. Sure. Because he was obviously being bullied at school, he was being made fun of, and his self-body image was horrible. But then she said, of course, that the therapist transitioned to a nutritionist. Long story short, she went through all of these steps, and she shares with me, every once in a while I'll get a message from her and she'll let me know how he's doing. He's down 50 pounds, he's exercising, he's taking care of himself, and he is learning how to have a better relationship with food and how to have a better relationship.
Even suicide isn't so much about anger turned inward on yourself. Self-harm can be so much about anger. And anger, aggression, feelings that you just can't express. So then your body is the target for all those feelings. So when somebody says to me, you know, I'm feeling fat, I feel, you know, talking about food, and again, I talk about, how are you feeling? What are these feelings that you're taking out on your body? Like, why are you being so mean to yourself? Sometimes people do need a higher level of treatment, and they come into therapy, once a week, and the therapist realizes that, let's say, once a week therapy really is not enough. And the other piece of it in treating somebody with an eating disorder is to have a team of people. Because as a therapist, I'm dealing with the emotional and psychological pieces. But I also really need to have medical doctors that I can consult with, nutritionists that I can consult with, and even people that might do a certain amount of testing, that in terms of whether it's ADD or whether it's some kind of focus issue or learning disability. So I really need to have my own team of people that I work with to consult with.
So when I was 10, I really was miserable in middle school, thinking it was going to be something great, and it wasn't. Thinking that I could meet all these new people and everything would change, and it didn't. And I had a plan. And I remember that day like it was yesterday. I started to attempt the plan. And I don't really know exactly what overcame me. I was in the safety of my house. There was no cell phone telling me to do it, thank God. But I thought, I had this vision of my parents, and then them having to tell my little siblings, because I was the oldest. And my sister was 2. And I remember writing in a journal, I'll put this away for today. But if I need to, I will. I remember what that felt like. And every single time I read an article about another child, I remember. Not exactly one of those things that you can really ever forget. I knew that that day, no one else knew that. And I kept that secret for a really long time. And that was pretty much around the time my eating disorder started, which, if you think about it, an eating disorder is a slow suicide. So I was going to make people watch. And I don't know that I thought that in my head, but I look back on it, and that's kind of what it seems like. I'm going to make you look at me on a regular basis and see how much of me you've destroyed, how much of me you've taken away, how much you've made me hate myself inside. And I did. It's crazy that kids' voices have that much power. And it carries through. The thing that I think most people don't understand about eating disorders is the catalyst that starts it, it's just setting off a disease. You think that you can control things, but you're not in control of a disease. It's just like cancer. Sometimes it starts to grow, and then before you know it, it's spread everywhere. My eating disorder, I have a poem that I wrote, and it basically says, a demon takes control, ripping away at my soul until nothing is left. And that's what it felt like. It started out like a simple idea. And then you can't stop. Even when you're in a hospital, you can't stop. I was inpatient, outpatient for, twice I was hospitalized during my 8th grade year. I did outpatient for the majority of it. I wasn't in school. If I was allowed to go to school when I was doing partial inpatient, most of the time I was too weak. I literally couldn't get up or off the couch. and being at home was safer than being at school.
I did not actually try on my own. I was kicked out of my last program for noncompliance, which noncompliance means I was eloping during the day when I should have been in my therapy sessions. They couldn't find me at the hospital. I was not participating in the program. I was, I believe, 16 at this time.
I didn't want to be there. I didn't want help. I wanted to die. Again, I wanted to die. But I didn't want to die by doing it myself. I just wanted things to fade out and life to take its course and me be done. And so I was not participating appropriately in the program. And so my doctors kicked me out, and they had a conversation with my parents. I was 16, and they told my parents I would never be allowed back in the program, and that the prognosis for my life was that I would be dead by the time I was 18.
My parents considered sending me to a residential care facility in Arizona, but I really didn't want to go.
Right.
I should also say that my parents moved me out of my district to a private school in high school. It made no difference.
Really?
It made no difference at all.
It made no difference because the children at your new school picked up where the other kids left off, or the damage was already done?
Damage was already done.
Yeah, so you picked up where your bullies left off.
Yep.
So you continued the abuse onto yourself. And I think that that's so important because one of the number one things that I say to parents when their child is being bullied and what have you, I say to them, move the school system. Like, it's sometimes the win is self-help. Sometimes the win is a healthy living environment. Sometimes we as parents like to be right fighters. We want the behaviors against our children to stop.
Right.
But in sometimes the cases, the real win is leaving the school system or doing so. Like, we don't have to right fight it, but by that time, since it started so young, you're talking at 18, you're talking 10 years of abuse now.
Well, no, it was 13 when I went to high school, an all-girls private school.
Okay.
And my parents thought that that would be a better move.
All right.
Maybe there wouldn't be so much focus on my body. I had to wear a uniform. I wasn't bullied there, but guess what? Mean girls are mean girls. They were cliques. And I was the sick girl.
Yeah.
So here, in my old school, I was the fat girl. Then I was the skinny girl. Now I'm the sick girl.
Right.
Different places, same stuff.
So the sick girl title that you gave yourself came from students or it came from yourself?
I mean, I was in and out of hospitals.
Right. But
Dianne, I looked sick.
But did that come from you, or did it come from the outside world? Or do you remember?
I mean, I don't think that well, no, I mean, my friends, I did have one very good friend who had to stop being friends with me because she hated watching me kill myself.
Yeah.
I stopped getting invited to go do things because in high school, it involves meals.
Right.
You know, you go to the mall and you have dinner at a restaurant, or, you know, I made people uncomfortable.
I keep making that point because I think it's so important for parents to understand that our children pick up where the abuse takes over, right? So the girls and the boys, they could stop bullying you, they could have stopped. But I think what is so important in all of this is that with social media and without social media, but particularly today, we pick up where we continue it. So your own inner dialogue, so even though you said it yourself, you went from being the fat kid to the skinny kid to the sick girl, and so you have adopted that label because you were in and out of hospitals. Whether people were saying it to you or whether people were not saying it to you, it didn't matter because it was living inside of you no matter what. This demon of you're not worthy, and you gave yourself a label. And so...
And it has like its own journey.
Of course it does.
It starts out small and little, and once your self-worth and self-value are nothing, you don't have a voice, and you take on whatever, you know, issues that you have. So during this time, I was about 15, I think, I felt isolated. I felt broken and damaged, and no one was ever going to like me. I didn't really have any close friends. I began cutting.
And I would do it in the privacy of my own room. Surface cuts, what I think most people don't understand about self-mutilation is not that you're trying to actually cut yourself so that you bleed to death. It's not. You're not effectively trying to commit suicide when you become a cutter. When you become a cutter or any kind of self-mutilation, where it be burning, you are trying to find an outlet for your pain, literally, through your body, because your body feels full of it. So to cut, I would bleed out my pain. The problem with cutting is it's not sneaky or able to be covered very easily. But in that moment, you don't seem to care. It just feels like, I need to get out. I need to get out right now. It needs to get out. And then you end up wearing long sleeve t-shirts and making excuses, and it becomes shameful.
I think it's all over the place. I wouldn't say that everybody who has an eating disorder has done some kind of self-harm or cutting. I think that it can be an aspect of it as, again, a way to cope, to feel pain, to numb yourself in some ways, as a cry for help. Although a lot of times self-harm is done places on your body that people can't see. But it really is about, how are you expressing feelings in a way, through your body, that you aren't putting into words.
But my scars will never go away. And in the wintertime, it's not that big of a deal. You have your, and my scars are not as bad as some, but scars are scars. My one arm is a reminder to me constantly of how much pain I held on to for so long and how much I experienced. Most people don't notice them. Occasionally when you get tan in the summer, people will notice. And people have asked me. And I'm very forthcoming about it. I think that it's important to be, because there's not a whole lot of understanding or awareness. And what is even more important is, the eating disorder, the bullying, the suicidal ideation, the cutting, they're all symptoms of a bigger thing. They all are related. And the more we talk about comorbid things happening, the more people have awareness, and they can be on the lookout for everybody else, and they can start the healing process for other people when they need help. Because that's the most important part. When someone is crying out for help in so many ways, something's hurting inside, and we have to be able to try to help them. I wish more people understood, and I wish people understood then, when I was doing it, because instead I became, the weirdo, the wearing sleeves, the cutting, the crazy girl, and I did. So when you follow this path that's happened, it started out with just being different because I was developing. And then it became, now she's too skinny. Now she's crazy. Now she's, out of school because who knows what's going on.
So another developmental phase that I want to address, that girls are very vulnerable to developing eating disorders, is right before they go to college. And I see it quite often that a teenager will start to develop eating issues, or a teenager will have had some disordered eating, and it can escalate before college. And a lot of times it's because and again, not just because of this only reason, but the idea of going to college is really scary. And there's been so much pressure and so much buildup, so much competition about going to college, and that feeling of, how are they going to manage? How are they going to manage on their own, in terms of being on their own, navigating the world in a competitive environment in college without their home or their family there for them? So, to develop an eating disorder can keep them from going to college in so many ways. And it's a way of saying, like, wait, I'm not quite ready to go. So what strategies do I need to develop? What coping skills do I need to develop before I go to college? Because once you go to college, eating disorders are rampant. And can make people so susceptible to so many kinds of self-destructive feelings, so many negative feelings about themselves, so many feelings of not feeling good enough. So I feel like you really need a good foundation before you go to college.
Being a young woman going away to college without any self-esteem, without any real friends, because you spent most of the end of middle school and high school in and out of hospitals, maybe you're not that strong yet. And maybe you end up in situations you shouldn't be. Maybe you're not eating enough. Maybe you're not taking care of yourself enough. And there are people in the world that don't care about you. And after all of the drama and chaos and heartbreak I had caused my parents, after a situation I didn't talk. And my eating disorder took full force again. But that was also the problem of me having an eating disorder for so long. No one thought, maybe there's something else this time. It's just her, doing her thing. And so I transferred schools, and my eating disorder took complete control, and I ended up withdrawing my second year of school on a medical leave. I didn't tell my parents first, which probably was not the best thing, but it was the first time I stood up for myself. I dropped out of school, and my parents told me, you're on your own. You need to work. You need to pay for your own therapist, nutritionist, everything. And I did, and I fought.
Had I gone through all of that and had the exposure to social media, it would have been a very different story.
You probably wouldn't be sitting here
No,
today.
I wouldn't.
I believe with every fiber of my being, had social media been a part of your journey, you would not be sitting here today. And you probably would have expedited even faster your self-harm, self-mutilation, and suicide ideations and thoughts.
So it's funny that you say that, because I think it was October or November. At the end of my 8th grade year, there was a DC trip. And I fought with my doctors to be able to go. We fought against the school that did not want me going as a liability.
Right.
And they allowed me to go. By the time that I was able to go and had permission, all of the friends that told me they had a room for me didn't. So now I had fought for it, and I didn't have anyone to room with. So these 3 girls came up to me after lunch one day while I was doing homework, and I knew them, I grew up with them, but I didn't know them. And they said, we have space. Would you like to room with us? And I looked at them and I said, are you sure? Like, are you sure? And they were like, yeah, we have room. I said, well, you do know, like, they're gonna be like watching me and like there's gonna be more supervision. And they were like, it's okay. And I went, and I thought I was just gonna room with them, right? I was gonna hang out with my cool friends, and then I was just gonna room with them. Well, they were really nice.
Wow.
And we stayed up late talking, and the second day that we were in DC, I didn't hang out with my other friends. And one of those people is, to this day, one of my best friends.
I was going to ask.
She's one of my best friends, yeah. Like, her son calls me aunt, my kids call her aunt, and she lives 3 miles away, so it's fantastic. But I was sitting on her deck, catching up, talking about the dangers of social media, and what her son is only 5, my son is, my older one is 11. So I was talking about all the stuff that I'm seeing and how the parents aren't paying attention and how horrific it is. And I looked at her and I said, you realize that if we had social media, then I never would have made it out.
Yeah.
And she didn't lose eye contact and said, I know.
Yeah.
How scary is that? There is no other way that that story could have ended. If I had all of this in my face all the time, if I could not have escaped to a safe place every day, I'm positive. And to know that someone else that knows you knows it
that
too.
Yeah. And she probably parents her own children differently. I know that to be true. I know that this past week in New Jersey, I know of 3 students that we lost. Suicide is becoming a leading cause of death for children in this country. The statistics, the numbers, the facts, the data, it's there. It's just a matter of, as parents, are we willing to start parenting and really start having these hard conversations and making sure that we're opening up the dialogue for conversations around what's happening to our children.
Yeah.
There's a lot of resources for families, and there's a lot of resources for people who are struggling with eating disorders or disordered eating. This is a great catalog, the GERS catalog. It's very comprehensive in terms of it has books, it has different articles on everything from PTSD to dealing with the shame of an eating disorder to how to incorporate yoga and mindfulness in terms of eating and your body. There's a great book, it's a book that is called A Survival Guide for Family and Friends. And so it's a short book, but it just gives some guidelines as to how to help somebody as a parent or as a friend of somebody who has an eating disorder. This catalog also has resources of all the treatment programs. I do try to give this to people so they can take 2 seconds. Again, it's there are articles that you can read in 5 minutes and scan, just like everything is quick and fast and people want to read things quickly and get information disseminated quickly. So you can just go through this, and it does have a lot of resources.
On a side note, on a happy note, you've got 2 amazing children, right?
I do.
You do. You have 2 amazing children. You've got a career where you talk to schools.
It's actually volunteering on the side. So I go to hospitals, sometimes talk to patients, sometimes I talk to families. Spreading awareness about things that are real.
Right.
And talking about it, not making it shameful. Bringing awareness and light to situations so that people can help others. To show other kids there's another way.
Right.
Even in this dark that you feel right now,
Right.
I promise you, on the other side there is light, and it may take a while to get there, but there is. Like this is what I want to share with people,
Right.
because I know it and I feel it. I feel it every single day. Being able to help others and share and talk, just to show people you're not
can make
alone.
it. Yeah,
you're not
that you
alone,
can
and you
make it.
can make it.
I always say to people, I put my pants on the same way that everybody else does. So
Right.
there's nothing special. It's just that having, the ability to have a conversation with someone and sharing and opening up and letting people know you don't know who you're helping or what young girl is hearing this. Lastly, let's talk about what do parents need to be doing? What's your best advice to parents right now whose children, whether they have symptoms or not, what would you say to parents today?
Create open dialogues.
Okay.
Don't create rules surrounding their food, surrounding their, privacy. I don't think that children and teens deserve a whole lot of privacy.
Right.
Privacy is where the scary things happen.
Okay.
I remember.
I always say that. Do you hear that? No child is entitled to privacy.
No.
Yeah, they're just not, because they're children.
Their brains are not capable of even understanding the ramifications of certain things.
Yeah.
They're
So
not.
no.
They're not. So no, don't. I mean, I remember being younger, and instead of talking to me about why the food stuff started, it became, we just need to fix this. We need to fix this.
So no one ever really asked you why you have an unhealthy, they never talked about, they never brought it up.
Well, I think some of the ways that kids can start to develop their own internal ways of coping is I also like to talk with them a lot about their support system. So who is in their village, as I like to think of it, is that who's in your village? Who do you have? Who are your go-to people when you're feeling a certain way? Sometimes it's your parents, sometimes it's not your parents. Sometimes it's a best friend. Sometimes it's writing in a journal. Sometimes it can be moving, some kind of movement. If you're involved in sports, it could be a coach. It could be a variety of people. So I like to go through and think about who is going to be in your village and who can you go to when you're having a hard time, when you're having a bad day, because you can't always get a hold of your parents. And the other thing that I feel like can be so difficult is texting your feelings. Because I know as a therapist, I really talk about, if somebody's going to communicate with me, is I'm not going to do therapy on text. I'm happy to have a conversation with you, but it's so hard, and I think you can so easily get into that habit, whereas a child in college can be texting their parents and how they feel, and so much gets lost in that. And you don't pick up so many things. You don't pick up tone of voice, how somebody looks. I mean, there's a host of things that don't get picked up. So I think being able to communicate in person is really important. person or by phone, but something in real voice is very important. But also when somebody goes to college, I think to be able to find the resources at school, because schools do have a lot of resources as well. It's a matter of whether kids will take advantage of them, but there's certainly a lot of resources.
Sometimes kids won't come to us, and we as parents oftentimes like to think that our children, we're our children's best friends. And I would say to parents, no, you're not, because the reality is nobody was closer to their children than I was to Mallory. Mallory and I were very close, but it's shameful to know that you're being hated at school or that you're being picked on. It's embarrassing. And I think that parents need to understand that being hated at school, being made fun of for things that you have absolutely no control over, it's embarrassing to go to your parents and say that. So my advice for parents is to make sure that every child has someone that they can go to, whether it's a therapist, whether it's an aunt, whether it's a neighbor, whoever it is, and allow that child to have direct access to an adult in their life that they are willing to share this information with. And if they don't have that in there, then create a journal. This was a great suggestion that was given to us as we go through this journey, which was you write a prompt in your journal and write something, and your kid might write back to you, okay, on their next one. And then you accept that okay is all you're going to get. And then you write back another thing in this journal. And by the time you get through this journal or get through this diary of having conversations, because children may not be able to tell you exactly what's going on, and they may be embarrassed, but it might be easier for them to write it down and let you read it privately. But the most key part of that is once the child writes it down, that's not necessarily conversation for you to bring up and say, hey, do you want to talk about this? But what you're doing is teaching the child how to put things on paper and how to be able to articulate what's going on with them. And so dialogue doesn't always have to be what we're doing today and having this conversation. It might be just passing a note to your kid and your kid writing back something, and then at least they're saying something to you. So, but I agree with you.
It's funny that you say that. Both of my children, I bought them these, mother to son journals, and they're cute, and they're not exactly what you're describing.
Right.
Because they have the prompts already in them. It's not you and I, I'm not coming up with it, he's not coming up with it. But we like it, and it's something that's a keepsake. And we learn that you can just pass it back and forth.
Right.
What you mentioned also is we had an incident, I think it was about a year ago, and my son was at a sleepover. And there was some bullying that went on that night.
Right.
And things that were said were very vulgar. And my son was not comfortable telling me them. He was not comfortable telling his father either.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, I have an idea. I said, I'm going to give you a piece of paper. You can go in your room, go anywhere you want. I want to know who was there. I want to know what was said.
Right.
I want to know exactly who said what.
Right.
I will not read it in front of you, and we don't have to talk about it afterward.
Right.
But you write down everything and the truth.
And you know what's cool about that is teaching him to do that. It also gives him a place to park it, right? Like I think a lot of times kids have this information, they have this knowledge, and they have no place to put it. So imagine how different your journey might have been if you could have written down, I'm being made fun of because of my development or what have you, or because of my body and because of all of these things.
I don't know that there's a lot of advice that I could have given my parents, other than when your child seems withdrawn, when your child seems angry at the world, when your child starts to distance themselves from your family, the people that unconditionally love them, don't chalk it up to it's a teenage thing, or it's a hormone thing, or oh, well, I do so much for them, why can't they appreciate anything? It's not that they're entitled. Sometimes there's so much hurt inside that they don't know how to get out and they don't know how to deal with. And I would say maybe try to create more opportunities for open dialogue. Different ones, not asking a million questions. Take them out and go do something that they enjoy and maybe you don't love, or surprise them with ice cream for dinner, or breakfast in bed for dinner, whatever it takes, right? To get them to let their guard down a little bit. Lay in bed next to your preteens, occasionally. Because a lot of times as those eyes start to close and all those thoughts are starting to funnel out as they fall asleep, sometimes you get a lot. Just be open to listening. And don't assume that, they just don't want or need you. They do. They do. Stay on top of their devices. Stay in the mix of when they have friends over. Listen. Check in. Because you'll hear a lot. Be the one that volunteers to drive them to the school dance or pick them up. I mean, the best is to pick them up, honestly. Or, wherever they're going, if they're going to movies. Turn on some music, not too loud, and be just a bystander listening. You'll find out a lot.
Times that you're not sitting down actually like, let's have a conversation about X, Y, and Z, but it's these times that are sort of not necessarily planned for these conversations that kids will talk. A lot of times I hear in car rides kids talk, and I also hear about right before they're supposed to go to sleep. And all of a sudden the parent's like, wait, I'm tired. I don't really want to have this whole conversation about, this conflict or how you're feeling or bringing up this, but that's when they want to talk about it. So I think it's looking for those inopportune I don't know if it's inopportune moments, but those moments that aren't necessarily the moments you think your child is going to talk to you.
And if you keep being a parent that lets them know that whatever it is, you're not going to judge them, it'll end up coming out. But you have to make sure that you're making the time for that, because they're not going to come to you and tell you, I need time for it. You have to be the one. And just create open spaces. If we don't start doing something about it, we're going to have serious tragedies everywhere. This is when Mallory's story made headlines, when I read about Mallory, I literally sobbed. I didn't know her, but I knew her because I was her. And my heart broke because she didn't deserve that. She didn't deserve that ending. She did not deserve the way that people made her feel inside. And she came from a good family that cares and loves, and the fact that Dianne is doing what most parents don't choose to do. She's using Mallory's legacy to save other kids.
Absolutely. It's just to relive that
every single day.
Mm-hmm.
But I know from my own personal experience with other people attempting suicide, with other people using their eating disorders, when other people finally admit that they've been in a physically abusive relationship and they are scared to get out, but they need to, or have been sexually assaulted and never told anyone. When you help save one, it matters so much because there's this huge ripple effect. You create one, and that person goes out and they help others, and the ripples get bigger and bigger and bigger. And sometimes people think my voice doesn't matter or my action doesn't matter. But you don't realize over the course of a lifetime how many ripples you can make and how big your net can be. And that's the reality of it, is it trickles so far. I think that I was so broken. The hard part about not having self-esteem from a young, early age, 8 is a lot. Had I been 10, 12, 15, maybe it would have been different. And my parents, they really did bolster self-esteem, but I was so young that I didn't even get what it meant yet. It set me up for a lifetime of situations that I didn't have a voice, I didn't speak up loudly, I didn't advocate for myself. I ended up very hurt by people in many different kinds of ways. And some of those ways actually changed the way that I thought completely. Changed my coping mechanisms, changed how I could function in the world. Sometimes when certain circumstances break you, they really break you. And your brain isn't even capable of recognizing it because it covers it up and it shoves those situations so far into your self-conscious that you pretend like they're not real. But they don't ever go away. And then they start to come out. And they show up when your brain is ready to process it. I spent a very long time in my adult life unaware of why I reacted to things the way I did. I didn't even understand that there was nothing wrong with me. It was things that had happened and what it did to my brain. I'm very thankful that I have 2 children because my children were the ones that brought it to my attention. When life starts to and seems to make sense, I don't even really care anymore about how bad it was sometimes. Because what I see now is that there was this bigger plan that I couldn't see then. And it's allowed me to touch other people's lives. It's allowed for me to let people in that maybe I wouldn't have even noticed back then as someone who could be my friend. And I've experienced so many great times with people and truly felt loved for exactly who I am. Fully accepted for the weird quirks I have, for the stupid jokes I tell, for just showing up. It's absolutely been worth sticking it out.
Well, I think that your story is really powerful. I think it's incredible what you're doing with the things that, with the life that you've been given and how you've turned it glass half full. And I love seeing you today. You look healthy, you look happy, you look amazing. And I'm just really happy to be a part of your story and be a part of your journey. And I think this parent project is gonna be probably one of my favorites because I think it just touches on so many important issues, whether they're boys, girls, adults, whatever it is, having a healthy relationship with food, but more importantly, having a healthy relationship with ourselves and understanding that we don't have to be perfect to fit in. So
thank you for having me. And I think, you know, what you just said is the most important. Even if you are broken with your food or you feel like you're never going to be able to be healthy, because I am sure that there were people that really thought I never would, there is that possibility. It's work and it's long and it's hard, but it's worth it.